March 16, 2008 began like any other quiet Sunday in Santa Monica, California. The coastal neighborhood was calm, the streets still, and nothing suggested that a brutal crime had taken place just hours earlier. Yet behind the closed door of a modest bungalow, a carefully staged scene waited to be discovered. When police officers arrived to conduct a welfare check, they were immediately struck by the strong smell of natural gas. A candle burning near the front entrance, its flame flickering dangerously close to disaster. The stove had been turned on deliberately, but the burner had not been lit. The house had been transformed into a ticking time bomb, clearly intended to explode and erase whatever evidence remained inside. The plan, however, had failed. And deeper within the home, officers made a far more disturbing discovery. In the bedroom at the back of the bungalow lay the body of a 21-year-old woman. Her name was Juliana Reading. She had been strangled to death. Juliana Reading's story would go on to trouble investigators and devastate her family for years. It was not a pace defined by a lack of evidence, but rather by the haunting question of why, despite so many clues, justice never arrived. Juliana grew up in Tucson, Arizona, in a loving and supportive family. Her parents, Patricia and Greg Reading, provided a stable upbringing, and by all accounts, her childhood was happy and secure. She attended South Point Catholic High School, where she was known as an ambitious young woman with artistic sensibilities and a strong sense of independence. Juliana was not driven solely by fame. She dreamed of owning her own business one day, possibly opening a boutique and building a life on her own terms. After graduating high school, Juliana made a decision shared by many young dreamers. In 2005, she moved to Southern California, drawn by the promise of opportunity in modeling and acting. Though she left Arizona, she never truly distanced herself from her family. She called her parents frequently, sent constant text messages, and returned to Tucson whenever she could. The bond between them remained close and unbroken. By 2008, Juliana was living independently in a small bungalow in Santa Monica. Her father helped her pay the rent, wanting to ensure she had a safe place to live while she pursued her goals. She was enrolled at Santa Monica College and worked as a waitress to support herself while auditioning for modeling and acting jobs. The work was demanding, the pay unpredictable, but Juliana appeared content. She was building a life she believed in. There were no obvious signs that her life was in danger. On Saturday, March 15, 2008, Juliana went about her day normally. She spent time playing golf earlier in the day before returning to her bungalow in the evening. That night, she stayed in watching television, mostly reruns of the sitcom Seinfeld. Phone records would later show that she exchanged text messages throughout the evening. Nothing in those conversations suggested fear, panic, or distress. Sometime around 10 p.m., the messages stopped. That moment would mark the last known contact Juliana had with anyone. The following day, Sunday, March 16th, silence replaced routine. Patricia Reading attempted to call her daughter, but received no answer. She sent text messages, expecting a response that never came. At first, she assumed Juliana was simply busy, but as the hours passed and the silence continued, unease set in. Then Patricia received a call from Juliana's neighbors. They reported that they had not seen Juliana all day. Her dog was still inside the bungalow, but the house itself was eerily quiet. The concern deepened when Patricia learned that Juliana's car remained parked in the driveway. By early evening, Patricia knew something was terribly wrong. At approximately 6 p.m., she contacted the police and requested a welfare check. When officers arrived at the bungalow, they initially found nothing overtly suspicious from the outside. The neighborhood was quiet, and there were no visible signs of forced entry. But once they stepped inside, the situation quickly changed. The overwhelming smell of natural gas filled the air. Investigators soon realized that the stove had been turned on intentionally without ignition, while a candle had been placed nearby. It was a deliberate attempt to cause an explosion and destroy evidence. As officers searched the home, they discovered Juliana's body in the bedroom. She was already deceased, and it was immediately clear that she had been the victim of a violent attack. The scene showed signs of a struggle. Furniture had been moved, and objects were out of place. Juliana had not gone quietly. An autopsy later confirmed that she had been manually strangled. Evidence beneath her fingernails revealed her own DNA, mixed with that of her attacker, indicating she had desperately tried to pull her assailant's hands from her throat. Phone records added another heartbreaking detail. Juliana had attempted to dial 911 during the attack, but the call was disconnected before it could go through. Neighbors later told investigators that they heard what sounded like furniture being moved, and someone shouting, at approximately 9:53 p.m. the night before. At the time, it hadn't seemed alarming. In a city like Los Angeles, noise often blends into the background. Only in hindsight did those sounds take on a far more sinister meaning. Investigators carefully processed the crime scene, collecting multiple DNA samples from Juliana's clothing, her throat, her phone, and the front door. The attempt to fill the bungalow with gas made one thing clear. Whoever committed the murder had planned ahead and intended to eliminate all traces of their presence. As detectives began interviewing friends and family, one name surfaced almost immediately. Juliana's father suggested they speak with John Gilmore, a man with whom Juliana had been involved in an on-and-off romantic relationship. Greg had long been uneasy about Gilmore, describing him as volatile and prone to anger. Gilmore's history with Juliana raised serious concerns. He had previously kicked in her car door during an argument and had once broken into her home. To investigators, he appeared to be an obvious suspect. When questioned, Gilmore admitted that he and Juliana argued frequently. He told police that on the night of March 15th, they had exchanged tense text messages. Around 10 p.m., Juliana stopped responding. The next morning, concerned by the silence, Gilmore claimed he went to her bungalow. Her car was in the driveway, but no one answered the door. He stated that he noticed a candle burning inside, but did not smell gas. Eventually, he left. At first, everything pointed toward him, but evidence soon complicated that assumption. Surveillance footage placed Gilmore at a Jack-in-the-Box restaurant and a nearby convenience store during the estimated time of the murder. Multiple witnesses from a house party also confirmed his presence elsewhere that night. Then came a critical forensic revelation. Much of the DNA recovered from Juliana's bungalow did not belong to a man at all. It belonged to a woman. With that discovery, John Gilmore was officially ruled out as a suspect. Investigators were left once again searching for answers, now facing an even more unsettling question. If not him, then who had killed Juliana Reading and why? With John Gilmore eliminated as a suspect, the investigation into Juliana Reading's murder entered a far more unsettling phase. Detectives were no longer looking at a volatile ex-boyfriend or a crime of passion fueled by jealousy alone. Instead, the evidence pointed toward something colder, more calculated, and deeply disturbing. Juliana had not been killed by someone acting on impulse. The attempt to destroy the crime scene by flooding the bungalow with gas suggested planning, foresight, and a clear desire to erase the truth. Whoever was responsible had not only taken a life, but had tried to ensure that no one would ever know how or why. As investigators examined Juliana's personal and professional relationships more closely, another name began to surface repeatedly. This individual had remained largely in the background during the early stages of the investigation. Yet his presence loomed larger with each new discovery. His name was Munir. Munir was a physician, outwardly successful and financially well-established. He had first met Juliana in 2007 while she was working at a restaurant in Los Angeles. By all accounts, Juliana made a strong impression on him. Soon after meeting her, Munir offered her a job as his medical assistant, a position that promised better pay and more stability than waitressing. At first, the arrangement appeared beneficial. Juliana welcomed the opportunity to earn a steadier income, and Munir seemed eager to help her succeed. But the professional boundary between them quickly dissolved. Their relationship became personal, and before long, Juliana moved into Munir's luxurious Beverly Hills home. What may have initially felt like comfort and security gradually became something far more troubling. Friends later recalled that Munir appeared possessive, deeply invested in Juliana's whereabouts and decisions. He showered her with gifts and promises, offering financial support and even proposing marriage. He spoke of buying her a luxury car for her 21st birthday. Gestures that on the surface seemed generous, but soon began to feel overwhelming. Juliana grew uneasy. The attention felt less like affection and more like control. Eventually she made the decision to leave. Juliana moved out of Munir's home and into the Santa Monica bungalow her father helped her secure. She wanted her independence back. Although the breakup appeared to end without open hostility, the emotional fallout was far from resolved. Soon after, Juliana's father, Greg Reading, uncovered a devastating truth. Munir was not only involved with Juliana, he was married and had 3 children living in Lebanon. When Greg shared this information with his daughter, she was devastated. She told her father she wanted no further contact with Munir and intended to cut ties completely. For Juliana, the chapter was closed. For Munir, it may not have been. Despite Juliana distancing herself, Greg remained in contact with Munir for a separate reason. The 2 men had been involved in a business venture together. Over time, Greg began to suspect that Munir's operations were questionable, possibly even illegal. As concerns mounted, the business relationship collapsed. Investigators later noted a chilling coincidence. Juliana was murdered just 1 week after the business deal fell apart. As detectives continued to dig into Munir's background, they uncovered another critical connection, one that would change the trajectory of the case entirely. Her name was Kelly Pack. Kelly Pack was 47 years old and had a long-standing association with Munir. Financial records revealed that within an 18-month period, Munir had transferred more than $1 million to her through a series of large payments. She had been involved in several of his business dealings and was known to be fiercely loyal. More troubling still was what investigators learned about her reputation. Pack was not a passive associate. She was known for intimidating individuals who crossed Munir, confronting people on his behalf, and applying pressure when disputes arose. Detectives began to suspect that she may have acted as an enforcer, someone Munir relied on to handle problems he preferred to keep at a distance. At this stage, investigators faced a delicate challenge. There was no direct evidence linking Pack to Juliana's murder, yet. Alerting her too soon could risk losing the opportunity to prove her involvement. Police placed her under surveillance, waiting patiently for a chance to collect a DNA sample without her knowledge. That opportunity eventually came in the form of a discarded cigarette. When the forensic results returned, the case shifted dramatically. Kelly Pack's DNA matched samples found throughout Juliana's bungalow. It was present on the front door, the locks, Juliana's clothing, her phone, and most damning of all, on Juliana's throat. The evidence confirmed that Pack had been inside the bungalow and had come into direct physical contact with Juliana during the attack. There was no innocent explanation for that. Kelly Pack was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. As investigators prepared to move forward, they turned their attention back to Munir. But he was already gone. Shortly after learning of Pack's arrest, Munir fled the United States. Authorities believed he returned to Lebanon, a country with no extradition treaty with the U.S. He was never questioned. He was never charged. He vanished beyond the reach of American law. Prosecutors believed Munir was the missing piece, the man who connected every aspect of the crime. Their theory was that Munir had hired Pack to intimidate Juliana, possibly as retaliation for being rejected, or as leverage in his failed business dealings with Greg Reading. What may have been intended as a threat escalated when Juliana fought back, resulting in a violent struggle that ended her life. When the case went to trial, her defense team mounted an aggressive challenge, attacking the prosecution's narrative at every turn. The most damaging setback came when the judge ruled that prosecutors could not present the theory that Pack had been acting under Munir's direction, citing insufficient direct evidence. Without that context, the case was stripped down to physical evidence alone. The defense argued that there were no eyewitnesses and no direct proof that Pack had killed Juliana. They introduced the concept of secondary DNA transfer, suggesting that Pack's DNA could have been transferred indirectly through shared objects or surfaces, possibly from Munir's home, where Juliana had once lived. It was a controversial argument, but it introduced doubt. After years of delays, the trial concluded in 2013. The verdict stunned Juliana's family and those who had followed the case closely. Kelly Pack was found not guilty. As she walked free, Juliana's family erupted in anguish and disbelief. They shouted that justice had failed, that the truth had been ignored, and for them, the nightmare was far from over. No one was ever convicted for Juliana Reading's murder. Munir remained in Lebanon, insisting on his innocence. In later years, he would be arrested in Germany on allegations of medical fraud involving botched procedures that left patients permanently disfigured, only to be released and return once again to Lebanon. Kelly Pack would also resurface in connection with massive health insurance fraud charges, posting bond before disappearing from authorities yet again. For Juliana's family, the loss never faded. Her mother, Patricia, found solace in painting in her daughter's room, a quiet ritual that helped her cope with grief. She described feeling as though time had stopped in 2008, as if their lives had never truly moved forward. Juliana Reading was young, determined, and full of promise. She fought for her life in her final moments, leaving behind evidence that spoke clearly, even if the system refused to listen. Her case stands as a haunting reminder that justice does not always prevail, and that sometimes the truth exists without consequence. Juliana deserved more.